So what's good, everyone? Today I wanted to speak on the story of the two daughters and Lot. Someone in my comment section left a comment about the story, so that's why I'm doing this one. So if you are familiar with the story, the first thing I want to say, in no way, shape, or form do I condone it. Do I think it's right? I highly am disgusted by it. In fact, I thought my brain was skipping when I was reading it because I wasn't expecting that. And if you are not familiar with the story, it starts at Genesis 19:30, and it's basically about two daughters who one came up with this wild idea to get pregnant by their father to continue their family bloodline. Now, if we look at the verse, we can see that the daughter understood how immoral and disturbing this is, because one of the things she does is get her father drunk. Now, she had no clue of what she was doing on stuff. Why would she get her father drunk? In Genesis 19:32, it says, "Let's get our father to drink wine and then lie with him." And so, with that alone, that lets us know that, she understood that what she was doing was wrong, and that if her father was actually sober, none of that would have happened. In Genesis 19:35, it says, "Again, he was not aware when she lay down or when she got up." So when I read that, it made me start to question things, because for me, I had this feeling that this story is not in here just for, a twist or a turn. You understand? This is not a thriller. So then I decided to look at Lot, and his wife and all stuff. And then I also decided to look towards the future of what would happen of the children that these girls would bear, because they did end up getting pregnant. So if we look at Lot, Lot is not so innocent himself. Lot is the nephew of Abraham, and he is actually related to Noah through Shem. And so because of that, God spared Lot because of his relation to Abraham and all stuff. And so what Lot did was he followed Abraham behind until one day where his herdsmen and Abraham's herdsmen were getting into it. And so Abraham came up with the idea that they needed to separate and part ways. And so out of all the places to choose, he chose the city Sodom, which was one of the most wicked places at the time. So wicked that God wanted to destroy it. So wicked that at one point he got kidnapped and his stuff stolen until his uncle came and rescued him. And yet, from my understanding, even after all that happened, he still continued to live there. So in another instance, when the angels had came to tell Lot to get out of the city because God is going to destroy it, there were some men who wanted to have their way with the angels. But Lot thought it was a good idea to give his daughters away to them. In Genesis 19 verse 8, it says, "Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you would like with them. But don't do anything to these men." And then we find out later on in the chapter that these daughters are actually engaged. In Genesis 19:14 it says, So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. Okay, so, with that being said, we can see he already has like a very immoral way of thinking. It's not really on the right path here. Then, when the angels tell him, "Come on, let's flee, it's time to go," Lot hesitates. So he's not even trusting in the angels or the word of God. In Genesis 19:16 it says, "When he hesitated, the men grasped his hands and the hands of his wife and his two daughters and led them safely out the city." Then on top of that, the angels tell him to go to the mountains, which he says in Genesis 19:18, "No, my lords, please," because he wants to go to the next town over called Zor. And also in Genesis 19:17, the angels tell everybody, "Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain." And what does Lot's wife does? She looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. So in a short time span of reading that, we can see that Lot is very much, it doesn't scream, "I'm a man of God." You understand? Lot wants to do what Lot wants to do, just as his wife, because if his wife is not even going to listen to the instructions that is of God, just imagine her everyday life. You understand? So, and look at what their behavior has gotten them. So if you put a child in a toxic environment and you are a toxic parent yourself, well, guess what it's going to create? An immoral, toxic child, right? Many times have we have heard from people who say, I am a product of my environment. If all you know is one way of living and you know by the people you're around, by the environment you're around, that's all you're gonna act like because you don't know no better. And so like maybe something comes into your life to like change your view, but other than that you're gonna act like what you see on the daily. These two girls didn't grow up in a household that was God centered. You understand? These two girls grew up in a household that was self centered and in a toxic city. So it comes to no surprise that they would act out in an immoral way. Not only that, how many of us have actually, said that when I grow up, I'm not going to be like my parents, but then we realize when we grow up that we have a lot of our parents' traits. Parents can be a big influence on us, and growing up, being around them, you understand? We subconsciously take on their personality and traits. Now, this is not excusing the girl's behavior or making up for it. I'm just trying to have y'all understand, like, how did they come to this part of their lives where they said, hey, yeah, let's get pregnant by my father. And then on top of that, and with their pregnancy, their children were Moab and Ben-Ami, who were later the fathers of the Moabites and the Ammonites, who were very much so against God, and also become enemies of Israel and living life immorally. And so what we're seeing here is what is also called a generational curse, not by God, but just by definition. A generational curse is patterns and behavior that gets passed down through generations. Until someone comes along and changes them. So, if anything, this whole story is telling us and showing us how to not act and behave. And also by them doing this act, they tainted their bloodline. It's not like they produce happy-go-lucky bloodline or family line. Like, look at the Moabites and how they act right now. You understand? They don't even believe in God. They believe in some other deity named Shamash. What they did was not favored by God, and we can even see in everyday life when we see others who are a little inbred. They come out a little different. So these actions are not right in the eyes of God. So when I read this and I understand the family and the history and the family line, it actually, to me, how not to be, what not to do, and what going against God can do, and how it can affect the family history and the family bloodline. Because the story didn't stop there, it continued from the past to that present when they did that with their father, and in the future. You understand? It didn't have a turn of events because this is a new chapter. You understand? The immorality continued and got even worse to the point where there's a whole clan of them now acting out against God to the point where they became enemies of Israel. But when I look at this, I see a whole tainted family bloodline. Two sisters inbred with their father. That's a tainted family bloodline. You understand? And it all started with Lot. His behavior and patterns ricocheted through the family line. And that whole family story is just there to teach us how not to act, how not to behave. And when you continue to behave and act immorally, it can affect your children. It can affect your future generations because they're going to copy after you. They're going to do what you do. They're going to carry that on and on until, somebody in the family line changes. If anything, it just shows the power of behavior and how our behavior and actions can affect other people. So I hope everyone understands where I'm trying to come from and I'm trying to relay here. You understand? I don't condone any of that at all, and neither does God. And what do I say I do? When I read a story, I look to God. I look at how he behaves, how he acts, what he says, and all stuff, and that lets me know all that I need to know. So that's it. That's all. Thank y'all for watching.